Yeah, we
I
can
see a
stop.
button for.
Hit the button right there. Okay. Uh, okay. And we also have a question box that if anytime you have a question, you can type it in so that you don't forget it. And then at the end, I believe we'll go over all the questions at the end. So, okay, so I would like to introduce Staci Jones, who is our statewide career and employment services coordinator for DDA, and she's been doing such a wonderful job. So, Staci, are you there? Good morning.
I am. Can you
Great.
hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Donna.
Okay. Thank you.
Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you so much for everyone that's on the line. We have lots of people here today. I have a lot to get through today, and I'm going to jump right in because I want to be sure that my co-presenter today has plenty of time to speak to you. I think you're really going to love her presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about transformation, and I hope that that word is not new to any of you. If anything, I'm guessing that most of you have been hearing quite a bit of that word over the last few years. And Buzz is saying to Woody here, transformation as far as the eye can see. And honestly, that's how I feel. I see it and I hear it everywhere. I wake up thinking about transformation. I go to bed thinking about it. And based on many of the conversations that I've had with many of you over the last year since I've been at DDA, I know that I'm not the only one. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that the act of transformation can absolutely be messy. It can be stressful. And importantly, I think oftentimes it can become easy to lose sight of why are we transforming exactly and into what are we transforming. So I really loved this slide. This caterpillar in this cartoon obviously needs some support from her change management consultant, who happens to be a butterfly, as you can see. All of us need support to get to the other side of transformation. It's not something that we can do alone. So I thought January, the first month of the year, it's really a great time to regroup, get back to some of the basics related to transformation. What does it mean? Why are we doing it? And we're going to hear in a few minutes from Jennifer Metrick from Change, and she's going to share the last several years of their transformation efforts. And finally, after Jennifer's presentation, I'm going to walk through really quickly some basic technical assistance resources that are available to providers, as well as some places to start if you're struggling with the beginning stages of transformation. So what I want to point out today is that I've structured this beginning PowerPoint to serve as a resource to you offline. So you'll notice as we go through the first series of slides that there are a ton of hyperlinks throughout the slideshow. Those are resources that can provide more information about any given topic that I might discuss. I won't be using this webinar to go into them in depth, but I certainly encourage you to use them with your transformation teams as potential training tools, or at the very least, conversation starters. And most of the links that I'm going to provide to you are actually directly from our DDA website and our Employment First webpage. So I want to start by specifically talking about DDA's transformation. Provider organizations aren't the only ones transforming. Back in 2015, DDA announced its own transformation efforts. And for the sake and scope of this webinar, when we talk about transformation, we're really going to be thinking about the scope of meaningful day and employment services. And I know DDA's transformation is wider than that, but we're going to really talk a lot about employment. So in a nutshell, when we talk about employment first and transformation, DDA has been moving to align its service delivery system to better support the outcomes of competitive integrated employment and full community membership for people supported. So this really means creating a more purposeful flow of services that can align with the national best practices that are related to strategies of customized employment. And again, if any of these terms are unfamiliar to you, I encourage you to take the time, not now, hopefully, but to follow the links that I've provided to make sure that you are familiar with them. The next few pages just kind of offer a vision of how DDA is phasing in parts of this service delivery alignment. So you can see this page shows phase one. We see that meaningful day services that are currently available under the new community supports waiver and will be available under the community pathway waiver renewal in July of this year. So you'll see that supported employment and employment discovery and customization will be phasing out in July of 2019. You'll also notice that a new service called Career Exploration will be available under the comprehensive waiver. You may have seen this service previously called Transitional Employment, but we changed the name to Career Exploration based on some feedback that we received from CMS. But there are no changes to the service definition proposal. This is the beginning of the alignment process that I mentioned. Career Exploration will cover some of the outcomes that are currently supported under the supported employment services. Specifically falling under Career Exploration will be facility-based, small group, and large group employment. And right now, we're currently working on further guidance related to those particular services. So more to come on that piece. This next page shows us the second phase. So we see that in July of 2019 is when our full menu of employment services will come online, and supported employment and employment discovery and customization will be phased out. So the reason that these employment services can't happen until July of 2019 is because we need the new LTSS system to be up and running to support the hourly billing component of the meaningful day services. So we'll be using these between July 2018 and July 2019 to phase in those new services. And like I said, during that time, DDA will provide much more guidance and regulations related to those service definitions. But I wanted to just kind of show how these two sets of services will be phasing in. Again, the next two slides just show a visual reference of exactly the same thing, but also cross-references which waivers include the meaningful day services. So you can see that all of the meaningful day services will fall under both the community supports waiver and the community pathways waiver. And I just want to point out that moving forward, you will hear the term comprehensive waiver, and that refers to what we previously had been calling the community pathways waiver. So I don't want people to be confused by that new terminology. So when we talk about provider transformation, what is it that we're exactly talking about? Well, in my mind, it's not just one thing. There are so many things happening, so many things aligning, and not just in Maryland, but nationally. So I think it's important, because there's so much happening, when we talk about transformation, it can mean any of these things and potentially more. So we might be referencing compliance with the CMS final rule. We could mean alignment with updated waiver definitions and new waivers, alignment with new service systems, and alignment with DDA's values and national best practices. And I'll quickly run through what I mean by each of them, but again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time delving too far in, because again, I've included links with additional resources, and none of these things are new. I just want to provide some context as we talk to Jennifer about her organization's transformation. So first, we have compliance with the CMS final rule by 2022. And by this point, providers should have completed a self-assessment and submitted transition plans to the regional office to be approved. The next phase related to that will include validation of those self-assessments by DDA. And DDA is currently working with consultants in the development of this validation tool that will be used for these on-site visits. Once the tool has been finalized, the DDA regional provider relations staff will be trained on how to use the tool, and providers will be given more information on what to expect when receiving a site visit so that they can adequately prepare. So on this slide, I provide basic provider expectations related to compliance with the final rule, but as stated, along with the validation tool, DDA will be sending out more formalized policy and guidance. Now, having said that, the policy and the guidance will mirror the CMS final rule guidance that CMS provided several years ago, and on which the self-assessment was actually based. So if anybody would like to familiarize themselves again or review the CMS guidance, I provided a link here on this slide, and it will take you to the exploratory questions and guidance specifically around non-residential settings and what it looks like to have the qualities of being inclusive, so that people can be aware of that. So again, there's not anything that will be new to anybody, but I wanted to make sure to provide that So the next aspect of transformation may have to do with DDA's service delivery system. So that means looking ahead again to the new LTSS system that will replace the current PCIS2 system, and among other things will allow hourly billing beginning in FY 2020. We have DDA's recently published rate study. We have a person-centered planning process and tool, which CCSs will begin receiving training on this spring, and then we'll begin using. So for any of you that haven't seen that tool or want to learn more about it, again, I provided a link to a really nice presentation that's on our website about that. We have the shift in the model of day services, currently being based on a minimum daily attendance, to a system that's actually really more outcome-based and fee for service. So again, when we think about aligning with best practices in employment first, we want to know that the service delivery system is geared toward getting actual outcomes, that people are getting the things that they want in their lives, as opposed to just providing a place for someone to spend their day. And then the end of 14 certificate usage by 2020. So for anybody that's not familiar, again, with a 14C certificate, that just means a Department of Labor certificate that allows provider agencies to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. So again, I've provided a link to the full report that was published earlier this year, actually in October, in collaboration with the Maryland Department of Disability. And the report outlines the current status of all of our 14C certificate holders and plans related to the phase out. So for anyone that doesn't know, DDA now has 3 waivers. We have the recently added new family supports waiver and the community supports waiver, along with what I just mentioned, the comprehensive waiver, which again in the past has been called the community pathways waiver. I provided links for all 3 of them, and each of them go to dedicated pages for each of the waivers. On those pages, you'll find background information as well as the actual waiver application. If you are interested in reading the waiver applications and you're thinking where's a good place to start, Appendix C in each of the applications is where you will find service definitions. And for providers, that tends to be the pages that are most useful. So those are good to become familiar with if you're planning on providing those services, especially when we think about the new menu of employment services, because those services in particular are things that we don't currently provide. So again, a good place to start would be Appendix C. And finally, and certainly not least, I would say, when we talk about transformation, it has to do with really aligning with DDA's values. So again, if you'd like to review DDA's values in depth, please go to our website. Our new Director of Communication, Tana Stevenson, has been doing a really nice job of making some adjustments to our website, making it easier to navigate and find things and kind of cleaning things up a bit. So if you haven't visited our website in a while, again, I would highly recommend that you do that. But when we talk about alignment, I'll talk about a couple of our initiatives. So we have, hopefully everyone's familiar with our initiative around supporting families and charting the life course framework. Marianne Kane-Bresci, who's DDA's Director of Family and Individual Supports, has done a really wonderful job speaking across the state with various groups about this initiative. But really at the heart of it is person-centered planning that supports people and supports families to help envision a good life and supporting their lifelong trajectory toward that identified good life. And whether that includes DDA-funded services and or typical community-based services and supports. We have the principles of self-advocacy and certainly employment first and community inclusion. And hopefully everyone has heard, at least through these webinars and all of the capacity building that DDA has done over the last few years about employment first values. But in case you'd like to learn more, I would ask you to go to our Employment First webpage, which is linked here. We have positive behavioral supports, and then finally, person-centered thinking. And again, I'm thinking that none of these are unfamiliar to you. And the common themes that we see in all of these initiatives is that the person receiving services is really at the heart of the planning, the services and the supports that that true community membership bring, and everything that that means, whether it's competitive integrated employment or spending time in integrated settings, doing meaningful things over a person's lifespan, those are all the focus. So while it may seem that there are a lot of different initiatives, they all really perfectly align, and they certainly perfectly align with the values of employment first. So that's a really kind of quick and dirty lead up, but I thought it was important to provide some context before my co-presenter talks. So now joining me is Jennifer Metrick, and Jennifer is the Director of Operations at Change in Westminster. She's been at Change for almost 2 years, and previous to her time there, Jennifer worked in a university setting for over 15 years, first at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and then at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. Jennifer has a master's degree in public health and a master's degree in counseling psychology. She began her career in research and evaluation of public health policies, and she shared that she loves practical uses of data, which I found amusing when I read that she loves it, but it's perfect for what we do in this field, and data is actually really important, so I love that she loves that. Jennifer joined the team at Change specifically because their CEO had a dedication to a new vision of service delivery for people with disabilities. And now I'll stop talking and give Jennifer a chance to describe what it's been like for her in her time at Change. And I'm going to give Jennifer control of, so she can show her screen to you. And after Jennifer finishes up, we'll take questions for sure, and then I'll do some follow-up related to some next steps from DDA. So Jennifer, take it from there.
All right, thank you, Staci. The Change team really is so thankful for this opportunity to be able to share just a little bit of information around our transformation journey. And we're hoping that folks in the audience today can just take away a few really good nuggets of information that may help you on your journey as well. So I want to again focus folks on the comment box, or the chat box. If you have questions along the way, Staci's going to be monitoring those. I'll try to stop at a couple of different points to take questions so that you don't have to listen for an entire hour of my talking, but we can answer questions throughout a little bit. So I want to start off today by talking a little bit and giving some context on who Change is. And the kinds of services we provide and the people that we provide supports to. So for those of you that don't know us, we are, I'd say, a mid-sized provider. We are out in the Western region in Carroll County. We serve about 180 individuals across a variety of different services. Certainly our day and vocational program is our largest area of service. We serve about 135 people on any given day through meaningful day services and pre-employment, supported employment, and we're starting to use customized employment as well to help people really start to connect with that integrated competitive employment. We also have a respite inn, which is one of our pride and joys. It's newly renovated, and that's an opportunity for individuals and their families to experience some respite. The people get to come, it's almost like a bed and breakfast kind of feel. We have a 3-bedroom home in the community where they can come for that also well-needed breaks for families and caregivers as well. One of the new ventures that we're starting down the path towards is what I think in the new service descriptions would be called supported living. So we have a family that built a home for their sister who we serve through the day program and personal supports. And they also built that home for her and 2 roommates so that we're able to support individuals to live independently in the community through personal supports, and then hopefully in the future through this supported living. So that is a little bit about us in a nutshell. Certainly some of the other key initiatives that we've really been engaged in over the last couple of years is employment first, really trying to change the way that we're providing employment services and move towards the competitive integrated employment. We've also, through some very dedicated people that receive services here at Change, have gone down the path of really building self-advocacy skills and opportunities for individuals to go out in the community and really tell their story. So in the top left corner, we have a group of individuals, and there was actually 2 more that presented that day to a group of law enforcement professionals. And so this was a fantastic opportunity for our folks to really talk about how they see law enforcement, how they would like to be approached, the different kinds of things they wanted to know from law enforcement. And then they got to talk a little bit about different kinds of disabilities, what that means, and how that, especially how that is in context with how law enforcement are approaching individuals in the community. So it was a great advocacy opportunity. And they have a group that meets every week, and they're called the Voices of Change. And it is completely driven by them. And I think they've had maybe like 6 speaking opportunities with different community agencies over the last like year and a half, and are also going to be part of our board process moving forward. So that's a little bit about us. So I wanted to start with our path, and certainly we are only about a third way through on our journey, I'd say. We're on kind of a 3 to 5 year plan in terms of being able to really reach our vision. And it really started with the commitment to employment first and person-centered approaches, and this vision for how to do services differently. And that came directly from our CEO, Mike Shriver. He came to Change 3 years ago and has been pushing us towards this vision ever since he came in. And as Staci said, I joined the team just under 2 years ago and have just been very excited about the momentum and the positivity around transformation that I've seen at Change. And so it has not been easy. I'm going to walk through kind of where we've hit some curves in the road, certainly quite a few obstacles along the way, and I'll walk through a couple of our lessons learned as I talk about some of these major components that have led to our transformation. Certainly technical assistance has been a huge value for us. We have grabbed on to every opportunity that we've been able to, and I'll talk a little bit in a second about some of those technical assistance opportunities. Strategic planning has been our guide. It has kept us grounded. It has helped us create also a new mission and vision statements. We're working on core values, and it's helped us to focus ourselves on creating a very flexible organizational structure that's going to allow us to make the changes necessary as we move forward with transformation. And certainly customized employment has been a huge piece in what we have accomplished so far. Okay, so as I said, it started with a vision for the future. We have what I'd say a pretty traditional model, or we did have a very kind of traditional day center model where we ran services, day habilitation, life skills, community employment, all from a center-based facility, but then also offering opportunities for individuals to get out into the community, either related to employment, volunteering, or just meaningful activities. So that has always been a strong component at Change, and what we wanted to do was build on that, because what we saw is we were very siloed. We had these program areas very much mapped on to service descriptions and how we got paid. So we had personal supports, and that was one team, and they were a silo. And then we had day habilitation. We even had silos within our day and vocational programs with day habilitation, life skills, and vocational. Our vocational program was in a different building altogether, and up until recently. And so all of these programs were working independently of one another and doing things a little bit differently. And that wasn't really creating the efficiency that we wanted and kind of that sense of one team, one mission. So we knew that where we were going, we were going to need to change how that looked, because our vision for the future was that every person would be able to be, the world is their oyster. They get to choose the kinds of services they want, when they want those services, how they would like to receive those services, and where. We wanted to get to that place where it could be very individualized. And that was going to be pretty challenging if we stayed in these program areas and silos. All right. So we talked a lot in the beginning. So 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, when we started talking about, okay, there's change is coming. And here is our vision for the future. This is what transformation means. This is why it's important. Pretty sure that all of our staff really were on board with the why. I mean, theoretically, they understand that providing services in a different way so that individuals are really directing their own lives, they would love to do that. But there's all of these barriers that they were seeing in the way. How are we going to do that in our current service system? And also people don't like change. It's challenging, it's scary, and we really wanted to make sure that staff also felt appreciated because they were doing such hard work every day. And we didn't want them to think that just because we need to change doesn't mean that what the services you were providing were wrong. It just means we're looking to do it in a different and maybe more efficient way to really get the outcomes that the people want that we're serving. And so we do a lot of reading at Change, especially leadership team. And one of the books that we came across was Who Moved My Cheese? And this is just a cute little story. There's YouTube, little vignettes online that we used to have conversations at staff meetings with all of our staff at Change, and really to just get them ready for this process, because this is a long journey. It's not going to be easy, and we wanted to make sure that they were ready and they understood why we were making these changes. And so it's all about the cheese moves. And right now, it's in this certain place, and we could say that that's, in the center-based kind of approach to service delivery, and it's moving. We can see the writing on the wall, and we need to make sure that we are learning as much as we can, that we are trying to stay ahead of it so that when the cheese moves, we're moving with it. And so we were able to tie this to what transformation means and help them understand that if we don't move, it could mean extinction of our organization. And so we had to set that level of urgency with the staff so that they understood we weren't doing this just to do it, that there was real urgency behind it. And so we found this to be a pretty helpful tool in starting the conversation. So technical assistance, I talked about how we've grabbed every opportunity possible. It started 2 years ago. We were fortunate enough to be one of the 6 recipients of the ODEP technical assistance dollars. And through that, we were able to partner up with Griffin Hammis. And our first consultant, or our subject matter expert, was Ashley Lance. And she really started us with a self-assessment process. So she did a lot of observation as part of seeing, how we were providing services, also going out into the community and seeing the kinds of activities that people were engaged in. Was pleased that we had already 3 years prior to that closed our sheltered workshop. So we were at least moving in the right direction in terms of competitive integrative employment. And she gave us some steps and some critical pieces of information that helped drive our strategic planning process down the road. So she really helped us think about strategic planning in terms of employment first, and that had a great impact on what we did. Also, as part of that, my colleague and I, the Director of Program Services, was able to go out to California to a national Employment First conference, which was an incredible experience because we got to really hear firsthand what's happening in other parts of the country and the kinds of things that other agencies have done, small, medium, and large, and how they've tackled some of these issues. So that was extremely helpful. We also had 7 people go through free ACRE training, which was fantastic. And I will say this is where there was a lesson learned, though. We had 7 people go through, including myself, who doesn't provide direct service. And the issue was that we didn't have the infrastructure in place or a real customized employment team or approach. And it just kind of became one of those trainings that you put on the shelf. So they got it, they understood it, but they weren't able to implement a lot of the strategies because we hadn't changed our organizational structure yet, and we hadn't set up a system for them to be successful with that. So if I could go back in time, I would have used the ACRE training later in the process when we had an established team. So that was definitely a lesson learned. So from that technical assistance, last year we were able to write for and receive a TIP grant through Maryland Disabilities Council and Maryland Works. And this was another great experience. We got together as grantees. I think there was maybe 6 to 8 of us. And we were able to talk through lessons learned all the way through the process, and that was extremely helpful. And with that, we also hooked up with Griffin Hammis, and this time we had Corey Smith as our subject matter expert. And that technical assistance really focused on developing the customized employment team. We started with a team of 1. Our CEO said that, you know, financially, that's what we could start with because there really wasn't any dollars from the beginning that we could put to this. So we said, we know this is the right thing to do. We know it's part of our pathway forward. We need to invest in this, which was really a great opportunity for us. So we had a team of 1. And so that person really worked with Corey quite a bit on figuring out how we were going to organize our team moving forward, helped us just really get a little bit deeper into the model, even from the ACRE training. And at this point, we now have a team of 5. So in a year's time, we were able to grow that team from 1 to 5. And a lot of that was because we also were chasing dollars anywhere we could to build that team. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of those opportunities where we found dollars. So strategic planning has been our guide all the way through. We had the fortunate experience of being able to hire a consulting firm around strategic planning, Tweed Weber, and Al Weber was our facilitator and really had a lot of experience with other nonprofit agencies that had gone through transformation, particularly in Pennsylvania. And so he wasn't just helping us through a strategic planning process, he understood transformation, and he made sure that we stayed on track the whole way through to be able to make sure that we were aligning our strategic plan objectives with transformation and the CMS final rule and the guidance coming out of DDA. And so that was immensely helpful. We really try to stick to that strategic plan. If it's not in that plan, we're not doing it because we can't take time and resources to do other things that are not part of moving us towards that future vision. And so we've tried to do that for the last couple of years. So I'll talk a little bit more about strategic planning in a second. The last piece, and we're starting that this year, we're looking for money to be able to bring in a consultant around our facility. So at this point, we have one center-based facility. We did have two. Our vocational program was at a local health department building, and they needed that space back. We were able to rent that space for $1 a year from the county, which was a sweet deal, but they needed that space back, and we were at a point where we didn't have the infrastructure in place. We were still working on our mission and vision. We had a sense of where we were going, but we knew that this was a critical decision point. What do we do with the 80 individuals that we're serving out of this location? Do we go fully community-based? Do we go without walls? Do we open another center in another area in the county? Do we integrate into the center we have now with a full focus on trying to have full integration for all those that can and want and desire that? And so we ended up going with that third option, and we started to go down a lot of different roads, but when it came back to it and we sought advice around this, we were able to see that what was really truly aligned with transformation was making sure that we had this commitment to true community integration, and that this was going to push us. So by having a home base and including 80 more people to that home base, that was what was going to push us. If we opened another center, we would have done that same model just over again, and then we weren't really moving forward in our transformation. So that was a very challenging decision that we had to make. We really had to work with families around how we were going to make this work. It wasn't going to be overcrowded. People were going to have real opportunities to connect in their communities and not spend a lot of time in the day program. And so that just happened in June of this year. And so we have seen a lot of success in making that decision and progress forward. So we're pleased that we went down that path. So the next part of space consultation is, okay, so we have this center. It's over 30 years old, needs a lot of maintenance. We have plenty of property. We could do a capital campaign and really expand our building, but is that really in line with the intent and the spirit of the community settings rule? So, but we need that guidance, and we need to make sure that we are looking at all possibilities of how we can best utilize that facility, or potentially be able to get rid of that to be able to launch us into full community. I will say that we at Change have been skeptical of going full force into a no walls service delivery model, because we want to make sure that we're really staying true to the people that we serve, and we want to make sure that that what we're doing is individualized, and we're not just making a decision and that's for everyone, but that we're having different kinds of opportunities based on the needs and the desires of the people that we serve and their families. And so we don't think there's necessarily a one size fits all with this, and we're just kind of taking a stepwise process to figure out kind of what does that final service delivery model really look like, and how do we make it flexible enough to really meet people's needs. So that's where we're at with technical assistance. I just wanted to take a quick break to see if folks had any questions before I launch into that. Was kind of our phase one of our journey before I launch into the next
Jennifer,
phase.
we did have one question, which actually I think is a really good and interesting question, and it has to do with balancing the values, pardon me, of employment first when you come across a person you're supporting who's in crisis. So I think really, I guess the intent of that question is, how do you support somebody who maybe is on the path to employment who's also in a state of crisis? Is that something that you guys have encountered?
All the time. So we have a motto: employment first, but not employment only. And we're here to be able to help support people in all aspects of their life. And it can't just be about the employers and about everybody outside. It has to be about where the person's at. So if we have to help negotiate, they need, a mental health break, like we need to deal with this crisis, then we can help them with those skills to negotiate with their employer around that. The crisis is going to have to take precedent often because, it could be they're losing housing and they're going to be homeless, that they have had some kind of serious mental health issues that has hospitalized them, something that, we're going to need to address that first and then go back to employment. So we do a lot of what I call embracing the gray. So there's no black and white. Like, we can't just think that employment is the only thing that's important in people's lives. It's extremely important to growing independence and being an active community member, but we never sacrifice the other pieces that are important in their lives just for employment. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I just want to chime in and echo those sentiments, because I often get answered or asked similar questions. And again, I think when we think about what employment first means, we're still meeting people where they are. And obviously, if somebody's in crisis, that's where someone needs support first. And in fact, if we don't deal with that crisis, any other number of outcomes in that person's life may need to, change paths. And certainly the path to employment isn't always linear for any of us, disability or not. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. Does not look like we have any further questions at this time, Jennifer.
Okay. All right. So I'll jump into the next section. So I talked about how our strategic plan has been our guide. We started off last year with 4 overarching initiatives that our board and our CEO put together, all very much aligned with transformation and this idea of creating a flexible and nimble organization that's going to be able to meet change as it comes and opportunities. And so we were able to completely complete the 4th objective, which was around board governance. So that one slid off of this year's strategic plan, but we're still working heavily on the other 3, and they're listed here, or a summarization of them on the screen. So again, we're really trying to get it right and figure out, what does our service delivery model look like that's going to help create our vision, a vision of people being able to have a life unlimited, to be able to have growth and independence and meaningful community integration in their lives. And so we have been doing quite a bit of research. Some of the objectives under that initiative are looking at the evolving needs of our families and the individuals that we serve. Particularly, we have seen that there's a vast difference between the needs and desires and wants of families and then individuals that have been in the system for a while compared to those that are coming in as transitioning youth. And so we want to make sure that whatever we're creating meets the needs of all, and that we don't leave anybody behind. That's another, area where change is very committed to those with significant disabilities and medical needs, and we want to make sure that they aren't left behind, and they are very much part of our new service delivery model. And so we're engaging families through focus groups, through surveys. We're going to be this year tapping into the school system and trying to get some information from up and coming families and students, trying to get to what is it that you're looking for in terms of service delivery moving forward, and also get a sense of our core competencies so that we can build on those. The second area is around our staffing. I heard this yesterday. Bernie talked to the legislative committee. I was there yesterday afternoon around this need to professionalize our direct support professionals, giving them career paths. This is going to be critically important because there's a crisis right now in turnover and a shortage in people that are going to help deliver these services. So if we don't have the people, how are we even going to reach this vision? And so we're putting a lot of time and attention around recruitment and recruiting the right people that are connecting with our vision, and really developing those staff that we have, giving them the skills and the tools and the education to be successful as we move through transformation. And then hopefully that also creates opportunities that they're going to want to stay on board. We're also looking at educational opportunities in terms of tuition reimbursement and things of that nature through building some relationships with foundations and families to create an endowment around furthering education. Also looking at credentialing, national credentialing, that we could have some of our staff go through in groups over the next 3 to 5 years. And so those are the kinds of efforts that we have in our strategic plan that we're working towards every day. The third area is around how do we give tools, how do we build, how do we tap into the right technology, how do we look at all the different processes we do now to make sure they're aligned with the spirit of the home and community-based settings rule, but also that really are going to help us reach our vision and complete our mission. And so that has been a huge piece in the strategic planning process, and there's so many things to go through. So we're just kind of stepwise figuring out what are all of those areas that we need to address. And one of them I will talk about shortly is around just how we're structured as an organization and how that has helped us move forward. Okay, so another area that really parallels our work with the strategic plan was trying to engage all of our stakeholder groups. So I will say that as part of all of this, board participation in your transformation efforts is critically important. Our board has been educated and has been part of the conversations from the beginning. Mike really makes a point of connecting with the board on the latest information that's coming out of DDA. We've done several presentations around what transformation means, what it means for change, and how we're addressing those challenges and how we're moving forward. And I think that's really helped in terms of them being able to really guide us through the strategic planning process. They were critical to that effort and have been, are really great supporters throughout. Family engagement, we have tried to be as transparent as possible. We have talked with families along the way. We started with the why. Why are we changing? Basically did a who moved my cheese with families, why there's the need for change, what we think that change means, what do we think transformation means for change, and talk to them a little bit about our initial strategies, and have gone back, and actually we have a family presentation that we'll be doing in the next month or so to talk about kind of what we've accomplished so far and what are our next steps, because we always want to keep families and caregivers in the loop and tied into transformation. We're also going to do kind of a state of the state. Where are we now, particularly around the new service descriptions and the rates, the proposed rates that are out. And so we've done a crosswalk of all of those service descriptions and what that means in terms of the new rates so that we could see that side by side. It really helped us think through where are there opportunities, where are we going to have to change our business model to meet the new way of doing things. I do feel optimistic that there's a lot of flexibility. Even though fee-for-service can be challenging, there is a lot of flexibility in what we're seeing. Certainly there's still those pieces that are being negotiated, and I think it's important to keep advocating to DDA around making sure that the rate structure is right. Bernie talked a lot about that yesterday in Annapolis, and I feel that they're very committed to doing that with us. So definitely advise keep advocating around that. With family engagement, we also created a page on our website where there's easy access links for families to go to learn more about transformation, more about the CMS final rule, and I believe we also have a PowerPoint on kind of our approach to that, where we need to update that with some of the new information around the service descriptions and rates, but it's always a good place that they can go that's easily accessible instead of having maybe to navigate the DDA website. Community partnerships. I feel like we are part of every committee possible. We are out and about and making those connections all over the place because that's what's going to help us move forward with transformation. And certainly around transportation, I have CTS up here, that's Carroll Transit Services, and so they're an important partner for us currently, especially because they transport over half of the individuals that come to our day and vocational program to and from the center each day. We have a small aging fleet of vehicles, and that is definitely one of our major challenges that we are writing grants feverishly to try to change that so we have more transportation options with smaller vehicles, more flexible, so that we can get out in smaller groups in the community. So the Carroll County Transition Council has been a huge resource. So this is where I'm going to put in a little plug for transition councils. I'm actually also part of the Western Region Community of Practice around Employment First. We're having a meeting on January 31st in Hagerstown at the library at 10 a.m., I believe. And it's all geared around transition councils, how they get developed, how they are a critical piece in transformation. Carroll County is very blessed. They have a very robust transition council with partners, at least 20 to 30 partners sitting around the table on a regular basis, working out issues that are impeding students transitioning from school into adult services. DOORS is at the table, the school system, the post-secondary program, all the agencies in the county, non-public schools, the community college, our workforce development resource center. That's actually where we meet. And so everybody is part of that, even CTS and transportation. This is a major part of trying to figure out how to move forward together. And so it's been extremely helpful. DOORS has really helped us in improving our employment services. So really taking a lot of time and effort to build relationships with our local DOORS office. They've been very helpful in this process. So although DOORS does not fully pay for all the parts of customized employment, definitely don't like the D word, discovery, but we have, through that partnership, we have shown the crosswalk between their services and what they pay for and what they value, and how that lines up very nicely with customized employment. So it's really just that beginning stage that they haven't quite come to agreement to be able to cover, but we have been able to get a lot of those intensive job development services paid for through DOORS, which has been great. Carroll County School System, we have a great relationship with the post-secondary program. They actually utilize our Respite In for one of their programs, and that they have been excellent partners. Also, in terms of their speech and language pathologists, helping us to really think through how critical communication is and creating communication accessible environments. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Local Management Board, this is a new partnership for us this year and has been critical to growing our customized employment team to now 5, because we were able to connect with an initiative that they're supporting around disconnected youth. So those are youth 16 or 18, depending, to 24 years old. And these are youth that are no longer in school or working. This is one of the 4 priority areas of Governor Hogan, and one of the areas that the Local Management Board supports through the Governor's Office for Children. This is an area where customized employment is a perfect fit. So if we can connect with these disconnected youth, we can help them move through a meaningful employment process. They're going to come out on the other end with far greater likelihood of connecting to sustainable, competitive, integrated employment. And so this has been a really great partnership opportunity for us, and hopefully continues in the future. Certainly, we keep building our relationships with local employers. We have quite a few employers that allow us to do training programs and volunteer experiences. We do some group employment. We are moving away from that step by step along the way. We have, we're no longer doing state set-aside contracts, and we really are trying to move away from enclave work, build skills, and be out in the community and experience our training programs so they can experience different kinds of employment areas, but we really want them to go through customized employment and do it the right way so that they're able to connect to that independent integrated employment. So that's been the goal. And certainly Carroll County government has been a huge supporter of us. They support all of the agencies in the county, and that has been extremely helpful. All right, so I think I alluded to the fact that we really needed to create a new organizational structure. We needed a better foundation to be able to move forward with transformation. And so we were trying to move away from the silos and to create cross-agency teams that were working collaboratively together around our mission and vision. So we talk a lot about one team, one mission, and how to create that environment. And we wanted to be able to coordinate all of our services under one area and one lead director, and that has been very successful. So we don't have a personal supports department anymore and a day services department. They are all under one director and are heavily coordinated in that way. And certainly we're only about 6 to 7 months into this process, and we have definitely hit bumps in the road, but it's definitely been the right decision. We also created, as part of the operations team, two major teams in that. One, our customized employment team falls under that, because we want that to be a service that is across for everyone. We also, connected to that, created a quality coordination team. And so this was us pulling out all the separate case management that was happening in the silos and creating one team that was there to advocate for every person that we serve for all the services that they receive from us, to not only go through the person-centered planning process, but to really embed that person-centered planning process with discovery and charting the life course tools. And that is a new process. We've really just gotten that team up and running, and even understanding what service funding plans were and IPs and all of that, because many of the coordinators that are part of that team had not experienced that before in their roles. We had to do this organizational structure completely at net zero. So we did not add a position. We completely changed people's jobs. We had people re-interview. All of our managers, and we had 9 managers, had to interview for these new managerial positions, either in program services, in quality coordination, or customized employment. That was a little nerve-wracking for them. They got through it, and it was a great experience. The coordinators had to do that as well. So now we have 6 quality coordinators under 2 quality coordination managers, and we have 4 program services managers, and they have 2 program services coordinators. And so that's how we went through that process. So again, only 7 months in, and we're working out the kinks. But the goal, again, was to be able to break down those silos, create this culture where the priority is community integration, but meaningful integration, and certainly employment. So I talked about the quality coordination team and really trying to infuse discovery, because what we found when we were going through the ACRE training and through the consultation with Corey was that discovery is so useful in the person-centered planning process, not just in the customized employment process. So we wanted to make sure that we were expanding that, and we want every single person at Change to be able to experience the discovery process. That is likely going to take us 2 to 3 years to be able to achieve. We're trying to create that as part of the IP process, but we also have to do that one person at a time because it's a pretty intensive process. And so we are just beginning to do that in this fiscal year. Certainly, the other part of the organizational structure was really creating and pulling out the customized employment services from our more traditional pre-vocational services that we're doing based out of the center, but then also in the community. All right. Okay, so customized employment. I feel like I've talked about this quite a bit. This is our ultimate goal. We believe that over time we will get smart enough and creative enough to be able to go through the customized employment process with any individual, with any level of need, and be able to help them through a plan that they are driving to reach some level of employment, whether that's self-employment, it's with an employer, it's a job carve. We're really looking at all different opportunities for individuals, but it's going to take us some time. We, at this point, have had about 12 people in the last year go through customized employment or are in the process. And, you know, certainly we've hit some barriers, and it is very easy to slide back into a traditional approach. And although the traditional approach can get us quick fix jobs, they're not sustainable. And we have learned this the hard way on numerous occasions. So I don't like to say I told you so to our employment team, but that certainly we are learning that doing the model the way the model was intended is critically important. And when you start sliding back into a traditional approach, you are not going to get the outcomes that you desire. And really that is to help people have that sustained employment. They're building their independence, they're building the natural supports that are surrounding them in the employment. The greatest day I would see is if somebody doesn't need our services anymore. If we have given them all the skills and built all the supports naturally in their environments and they don't need us anymore, that's fantastic. That's a new vision. That's a new area that, you know, many of our staff would be like, well, wait a second, that's our job. We're supposed to be supporting people throughout their lives. But if we can get them to a place where they don't need supports anymore, that is the ultimate outcome. And we're not going to get there, and many people are going to need support for their entire lives, but anyone that can move in that direction, we're going to try to do. And so that's been the true goal of our customized employment services, and really getting people connected and being contributing citizens. So I could do a whole webinar on lessons learned from customized employment. So I can take that offline with questions too later if folks have that. Okay, so just aware of time. We're moving into phase 2. All of those pieces that I just talked about, our strategic plan, our reorganization, the community partnership building that we've done, that is all what I'd say is kind of phase 1 of our transformation. We are now entering into phase 2, and this, I feel like we're moving beyond the planning phase and getting that foundation right, into really getting into changing some of those processes and the way that we do business. And this is going to be critical, that we go in a slow and kind of methodical way as we approach this, because it's going to take a lot of time and energy. One thing that we're trying to do is merge what I call the micro and macro levels of service delivery. So our micro level is really being performed by our quality coordinators at this point. So they are going to be approaching discovery mapping and community resource mapping for individuals. What is around their homes? Who are their social connections, their social capital? What are the kinds of discovery activities that are going to be meaningful to them, that are going to lead to independence and integration? How do we use that information to do great goal setting with them, and they are driving their individualized plans? We actually have had a couple of people write their own IPs in the last couple of months, and that's been very inspirational for also the people around them too. We want them to be driving this process. And again, that also will help lead us to people really being able to have those individualized schedules. That's one of those requirements that we're all going to have to meet in 2022, I believe. So individualized schedules, opportunities daily for community integrated activities and experiences, whether that's employment or meaningful day. And we're frankly just not there yet. And so we're hoping that this micro level is really going to help us understand the person better and be able to plan with them better to create that process. But if we're doing that in a vacuum, and we are not connecting with the program services team, and they're having to do things more on a macro level. They can't think of every single individual all at one time. They've got to be able to logistically figure out all of this and be able to create opportunities that are going to be either individualized and or small groups. Like that's just one of our realities. So these two teams and these processes need to be linked together intentionally. And we realize this. We've been kind of working first, I'd say 5 to 6 months. We were really just working to get everybody used to their new roles and this new process, that we weren't being particularly intentional about connecting the two. And we realized just a couple of months ago, okay, we're going off track a little bit. We need to get back realigned, and we need to make sure that we are setting up places where these two teams are working together all the time. And so we've been able to do that through a case teaming process that happens every week, monthly scheduling. All of the kinds of activities that we're putting together at that macro level are then also talked through with the micro level. We're working on some databases that we can share those resources together that are going to help us really lead us to those intentional person-driven services. And that's our approach. So we're looking for ways now to make sure that we're being really intentional about the kinds of services that we're delivering. And then ultimately, our ultimate outcomes are helping people grow create independence anywhere we can, and really help them with social connectedness. So those are our goals. All right, so data. This is my favorite thing. I know this is not most people's favorite thing, but I've been a researcher and evaluation director almost my entire career until coming to Change. And so using data to inform our decision making is critically important to me. We are at a place where we're still pretty paper-based. We have been fortunate enough in the last couple of years to have an IT infrastructure put in place. So Mike was able to raise money and be able to infuse that because we needed that base. But even now, some of our processes, without a web-based data management system, we're still in the world of paper and pushing that paper back and forth. We need more efficient ways to be able to communicate data, be able to collect it and use it moving forward, because we're not going to know how well we're doing in terms of our transformation process if we're not collecting data that matches up to that. So that really leads me to, we are creating a new data collection process that is very aligned with transformation, with our efforts, with the person-centered planning process and people's goals. It's connected and we'll be able to collect information that the ODEP the twice a year data collection that we're all doing is at the foundation of this new data collection process, and being able to help track and communicate important indicators back and forth with caregivers as well. So we're trying to make this tool be everything and be able to communicate, create data that we can use, but we're still a long way from that actually being actualized in terms of being able to utilize that data. We've been piloting the data collection tool this past month. We're going to be launching it in February. The tool was actually, the idea for the tool came from a group, the TIP grant recipients. One of the consultants, Mark Warsbacher, I hope I don't say his name wrong, actually presented on a tool that they used in Connecticut as part of a demonstration project. And it was really around making sure that integrated activities were truly integrated, so that it helped you understand kind of where you were in the process of offering opportunities for community integrated experiences, as well as those social connections. And that's what I really liked about that tool. So that's definitely part of the basis of that. So more to come later on how that process goes. So another area that we're going to be exploring this coming year, we've talked a lot about it, but we're actually going to take some strategic planning steps around it, is creating a communication accessible environment, because we know that communication is at the foundation of people being able to direct their own lives. So many of the individuals that we serve have quite a few challenges with verbalizing their needs, wants, and desires. And so we need to create environments where communication back and forth is open, and there's ways that that's accessible to all people. And so we have been able to be part of a communication group as part of our transition council. There are some incredible speech pathologists from the school system that are driving this initiative in Carroll County. They're communicating it to everyone in the county, businesses, executive directors, the hospital system, trying to get everybody engaged in how we can create Carroll County as a communication accessible county. We're trying to do that as an agency, just in-house. They do a lot of great work in the schools, and then oftentimes some of those, the communication devices or the pod systems or things like that, don't always come with people when they're coming into adult services, or we don't have the ratios to always be able to implement some of the communication strategies they were implementing in school. And so we're trying to keep that transition seamless and people moving higher in their trajectories around communication, not kind of receding their communication skills. We're also have been fortunate enough to connect with somebody at Kennedy Krieger, she is a speech pathologist and has a few other friends in the field that would like to volunteer their time. And they're actually going to walk through some real strategies with different groups of people that we serve around creating that communication accessible environment. So that's an exciting initiative this year. All right, so it's after 10 o'clock, or it's really after 11:15, but Corey Smith always told me you can't talk about transportation until after 10 o'clock because it's such a stressful conversation. This is another area that we're putting a lot of time and attention into as part of our strategic plan, is figuring out how we can do transportation differently. Right now, I think I said this before, CTS provides in and out services to our day program to just over half of the individuals we serve. We have 5 of the kind of larger passenger buses, 6 or 7 minivans, and a car, 3 of which are new that we received last year through some grant funding, always trying to build on that because our fleet is very aging. It is sucking us dry financially. I'm sure many of you have that experience, and especially in rural and suburban communities. And so we're looking for different opportunities and ways that we can make transportation work. So all kinds of, we're exploring a volunteer driving program. Maybe we can partner with and work with others in our community, other agencies. There's these 2 great college students at McDaniel that got a grant, a small grant to start a nonprofit around a volunteer driving program for people with disabilities. And so maybe we can connect with them. We're looking at all different kinds of opportunities. We're talking to new families who haven't experienced services before around pickup drop-off points, so that we're not always having to come into the center. It doesn't have to be door-to-door service all the time. That's expensive and time-consuming. Our continued partnership with CTS, and certainly utilizing natural supports of the people that we serve as well. So all different kinds of transportation strategies and looking into trying to create a plan for that for the future so that it's in alignment with where we're going and how we're going to create this service delivery model. Transportation is going to be key in that. The other thing that we've started doing, especially when we're working with people with customized employment, what we found is, and this is a lesson learned of customized employment, is people need to be committed to the process. Oftentimes how they've experienced job development is, okay, you're going to get me a job, you're going to write my resume, you're going to get interviews set up, you're going to be there during the process, you're going to negotiate everything for me. It's all about providing to, instead of engaging them in the process and having them drive that process. So we even created a new services agreement for customized employment. So people, when they sign on the dotted line that they want customized, they are understanding that they are committing to be the most active participant in that process. We're there to facilitate it. We're not there to do it for them. We also start talking about transportation in that way. If people want to be truly independent, then they need to be thinking about how are they going to factor in how they're going to get transportation to and from work. We certainly have money that could go towards that, but even starting to pilot, our transportation manager had a great idea of a skill building activity around helping people schedule their own transportation. So even though we're doing it on the back end, they're calling up each week and scheduling with CTS when they need their rides, or even scheduling with staff or the transportation office. So just starting that conversation early and having them realize that if they're independently transporting themselves, that's really leading them to directing their own lives and not necessarily relying on agencies to do that for them. So it's just part of that conversation. Okay, so I am wrapping up now. Hopefully I have gone over a few things of interest or some nuggets of information that you can take to help you through your transformation process. The next steps for change is continuing our year 2 of our strategic plan. We want to expand our customized employment team. Even 5 people is just not enough. 2 of those are job coaches and are really supporting the people once they receive or obtain employment. We need to expand that program to be able to impact more lives. Utilizing data is going to be paramount to really being able to monitor how well we're doing on reaching our vision and setting goals for ourselves each year. Working towards discovery for everyone. That's going to be a critical drive as part of the quality coordination team, and really developing that intentional programming with emphasis on integrated growth activities. And that's really the focus of the program services team and their piece in driving us forward, which will be fantastic. Developing those transportation resources, we have to do it. That's going to be a critical piece in our service delivery model. And then we are going as a leadership team in 2 weeks to the Leadership Academy that DDA is sponsoring. And one of the things that we're going to be doing there, we have a leadership challenge. And what we've chosen to do is really further develop our organizational structure that's going to lead us to this ideal service delivery model. We need to do, it'll be great to be away and be able to do that thought work that's pushing us forward to that next level, so we can have a little bit clearer view of where we're going and what that delivery model is going to look like. So I am ready for questions. If folks,
okay, yep, we actually
information.
We do have lots of good questions here. Jen, I was glad to hear of your focus on staff advancement and retention, but I'm wondering if you are also exploring different sources for staff. For example, there are many highly qualified older workers that lost jobs and are still sidelined. That would be important. I'm also wondering if you are targeting hiring people with disabilities. Okay, so there were several.
Yes to both. So for our older workforce, absolutely, that is one of the strategies that our HR team has been utilizing to try to connect with a new area of workforce, and we've had some success around that, and also people coming to the field with just more life experience also helps to facilitate other people's growth. So I do think that is a great strategy for looking at trying to build the workforce, and that's a good area to look at. What was the second question?
It was about supporting people with disabilities or hiring
Yes.
people with disabilities. Sorry.
Yes. So we're doing this strategically. We actually have a great success story around this. One of the first individuals that went through customized employment, he came to us telling us exactly what he wanted. He wants to be a direct support professional. That is his dream job. He wanted to take the steps necessary to get there. We did do a lot of discovery with him because we wanted to make sure, do you want to do this because this is the community that you've developed and you're really comfortable here and you think that this is like a great next step? Is it the dream job trap? Or, is this truly what you want to do and this is what you're inspired to do? And he's the one that actually came up with and started the Voices of Change advocacy group. And this is his passion. So when we went through all kinds of discovery activities, it just kept coming back. Like, we had this cool, like, he's really good mechanically too, does all kinds of stuff with his dad, with his powered wheelchair and all kinds of things. And so we kept like trying to push that, and he was like, no, I want this path. And so we started out, our transportation manager was very open to the idea of creating an internship and as a bus aide. And so he has been a bus aide for, I want to say, almost 5 or 6 months, and is doing fantastic. He went through every single required DDA training. He passed first aid and CPR, BPS training, and he needed support along the way, and we've done that, but he is doing tremendously. And now he's, you know, he's quick to want to go, okay, but I want to be a direct support professional. And we're saying, okay, but people don't change jobs within 6 months. Like, you need to build the skills here, and then we'll take the next steps towards that. And so that's one opportunity that we did do, because we knew that we would be an open employer to that, and we would be able to provide the supports necessary also. But that's been a real success case for us.
Okay, we have a question about what types of fundraising you do locally.
So we have 3 major fundraisers a year that we do. We have a basket bingo, we have a very successful golf tournament, and we have a crab feast in the summer. And so those are some of kind of our standard opportunities to do fundraising, but we're doing a lot more in terms of development. Our CEO is running around like crazy with all kinds of development opportunities, but we've been focused primarily on grant opportunities and building relationships with local foundations and family support as well.
Thank you. This is an interesting question, and one that I'd also like to I'd love to hear anybody that has stories related to this. Have you or any people working, do you have people working online or home-based businesses?
Oh, that is a great question. We do not yet. We are definitely exploring some opportunities. Currently we do some mailers for the community college. We used to do those in-house as a sheltered workshop, and then 3 years ago we started going to the community college to do those. The issue is that's still group segregated, so even though it's in the community, it's still a bit segregated, and we're looking at, is there an individual that may be interested in taking on those mailers and creating a business of themselves, and us supporting that, and then being able to hire other individuals that might be interested in doing that. So that might be something where we do kind of a home-based business, but we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Jen, in your experience, how long does it take for your employment specialist to complete discovery and find a job that fits the customized employment model?
That's a great question. A lot longer than it says in the guidelines. Some people that are really committed to their own process and are driving it's faster. And depending on the kinds of skills and interests that they're bringing to the table, it might be easier. I'd say on average, it is definitely taking us longer than 6 months to go through the process. Some people are a little over a year at this point. We've made great strides, but also some of the jobs and the employment that they're reaching for, there's a lot of steps involved. And so we're working with them to try to get to those steps. Sometimes that means, and just like probably you and I did, you start with some jobs that may be connected, but not that, ultimate career that you want, to try to build towards that. But we're also realizing that we don't want to just place people in kind of the traditional placements cleaning and that kind of thing, if that's not something that really drives them. So it's fine to have a starter position if it's connected to your interest and skill area. But I would say it's taking a long time and it's intensive. It's why we had to pull out our customized employment team from kind of the day program and the regular supervision and activities they were doing, because we didn't want it to get sucked into the ratios until and that we wanted to keep it individualized. And so that's why we pulled it out as a separate team that kind of runs parallel.
We have a question about your transportation volunteer program. Do you have any issues related to liability with that program?
Well, okay, so we don't have a program. It's an idea that is actually getting kicked around as part of our transition council. There's a subcommittee around transportation that I'm on that subcommittee too. And so we're kicking around ideas. Doors is involved in that, but we have gotten absolutely nothing off the ground or even gone down that road around liability. But I'm sure there's a lot that goes into that. So it's just a little nugget of idea at this point.
Another question related to transportation. James asks, have you considered transportation delivery models with national enterprises like Rent-A-Car Enterprise or Uber Rides?
So with Uber, I think Carroll County has one Uber driver, which really drives up the costs and makes it not accessible. We would love to be able to use more resources like Uber and Lyft. We haven't had a lot of success recently, but that doesn't mean that that's not part of the equation. I don't know about the enterprise rental cars, but it's certainly, we're going to be exploring all kinds of opportunities. We are just dipping our toe into transportation. We actually are who was our customized employment manager and who started that team, he's now an assistant director, and he's overseeing transportation and customized employment with two managers underneath of him, because they're so related, transportation and employment. So we're hoping that we're going to come up with a lot of creative approaches, but we're very much at the beginning stages.
And a question about how many people you're currently supporting who are employed in integrated competitive employment.
Oh gosh, off the top of my head, I want to say it's somewhere between 15 and 20. So it's a small percentage in the grand scheme of all of the people that we serve. So those are the kinds of targets that we need to put in front of ourselves to try to increase each year.
And there's a question here that I'm assuming is probably more geared toward me, which says, would you consider an Employment First webinar solely dedicated to explaining all aspects of customized employment? And Beverly, we do have archived webinars on our website that are focused on everything you just talked about, the aspects of customized employment, including discovery. So if you go on our website and look for the tab that says webinars, you can scroll through and find those, and you'll also see on the right-hand side of our Employment First page, you'll see links to customized employment trainings. So hopefully that helps. I think we're at the end of our questions. People can feel free to continue to type questions if you'd like, because I have a few more slides to go through, and we'll tackle them before we sign off here. And Jen, if you could give me back control of the screen.
Oh, yes.
And then we'll be able to see my slides again. And thank you so much for that really incredibly comprehensive presentation. A couple of the things that I actually kind of wrote down that I loved that you talked about. One of them, you talked repeatedly about the fact that in the past, your organization really had silos according to program or service, and I think that's probably an experience that many providers can relate to. And I know you talked about the fact that that's a new thing for you guys, but would you be willing to just talk a minute about what kind of leadership it took to make those changes at your organization to kind of break through those silos? How did you start that process?
We communicated first and foremost the vision of what it would look like if we didn't have those silos, and if people really could direct which services they received, when they received them, and how they received them. And that resonates with people. That's not necessarily confrontational. And so people were bought into the idea. What they worry about is constantly, okay, well, what's my role in that? And so it took, our leadership team talks about these things and works on ideas all of the time. And then we have a really great working relationship with the managers. And so we were very transparent all the way through that, you know, we think what it's going to take is an organizational restructure. We don't think that we can achieve this mission and vision if we don't do this. And they bought into that. And there was a lot of, you know, faith that we had their backs and no one was, you know, going to lose a job. It's just that they would maybe be restructured into a slightly different position. So still at the same level, but a different role, and everybody was going to have a critical role in the process. I will say it was hard, and I feel like we're just now hitting our stride, where that's all starting to fall in place.
Thank you. And I mean, I think it's great to acknowledge, and important to acknowledge, that these things are hard, that these are not easy things, that obviously your organization didn't just make a decision one day and everything fell into place. And in fact, the other thing that I wrote down that you talked about several times in different ways is when you guys were facing, or still are facing, kind of tough decisions, you know, you talked about deciding what to do with the building and kind of what direction to take, is that you first of all, you sought some advice, so you got some more information, and then you really talked about measuring those outcomes against your values and the vision that you have. So always kind of checking in, does this fit with where we want to go? If so, then let's proceed down that road and kind of take it as it comes. So I appreciate that level of really keeping to your values. I also want to make one more plug. Jen talked a lot about, or several times, about the importance of transition councils. And as she said, the Carroll County Transition Council is extremely active and doing a lot of really wonderful things. And I just want to throw out there that DDA is working really closely with MSDE and DOORS to do some more targeted outreach directly to transition councils, because we know that, you know, Carroll County isn't the only place doing really creative, wonderful things with transition councils. So what we want to be able to do is share a lot of those promising practices with all transition councils, so people can hear what's happening throughout the state, what's working well, and kind of just do some better outreach on both ends. So I appreciate that as well. So again, thank you. I think that Jen's presentation really kind of takes the framework I talked about as far as transformation and really brings it to life in a much more meaningful way. So I want to talk now a little bit about, first of all, I want to reiterate, providers are not alone in this transformation. As I referenced, DDA is also transforming, and DDA is committed to supporting capacity building efforts among our network of providers, and we want to work with you on questions that you have or resources that you need. Now, having said that, we and I will not always have all the answers to every question you have exactly when you might want them. However, we want to try, and we want to get the information out that people need. So the very last slide, in a couple of slides from now, I'm going to share a timeline of some upcoming things related to further training, further guidance that's going to be coming out. But first, having admitted that we don't have all the answers, I'm going to walk you through what we can potentially help with. So in case everybody is unaware, we do have at each of the 4 regions an Employment First liaison, and that can be your point person for questions related to Employment First. We also have me at DDA headquarters, the Employment Services Coordinator, and there's only one of me, so I know it can sometimes take a while when people reach out to me to get me in person, but thank you to everyone that's been very patient with that. We also have a ton of resources, and I hope everybody has checked it out by now, but we have a lot of resources on our website, a lot of them related to many of the things we've talked about today. And also something we don't always talk a lot about, but I think is really important, is reaching out to your fellow providers, whether it's informally, you know, just calling up somebody you're familiar with and saying, hey, let's talk about what your experience has been around transformation, what's going well, what's not, or maybe even on a more formalized basis and seeking out a mentor and somebody that can help walk you through things that you're, you know, you're more interested in finding out about. And in my experience, people are extremely willing to share and to, you know, to share their good experiences, things they've tried out, things that have worked. So I think that can be a really important strategy when going through transformation. And you can definitely seek out and contract directly with a subject matter expert or a consultant, just like Jennifer talked about doing in certain situations at Change. So let me explain what we may be able to help with, because obviously we at DDA, we can't take the place of a consultant, but here are some things that we can do. So again, I talked about DDA regional staff can provide what we call resource consultation, which basically means they can answer basic questions about employment first, they can offer some targeted information, they could make suggestions about the resources that already exist around your question or the subject that you'd like to find more about. And at the regional level, the regional staff are really good at being able to make suggestions about a potential peer mentor or another organization that has gone through a similar process that might be willing to have a discussion with you. And since obviously if that organization is from your same region, it's going to be a little easier to connect. And also regional staff can direct you to current COMAR regulations, requirements, and things like that. So please reach out to your regional office first if you have questions to see if they have the answer to what you're looking for. But maybe you need a little bit more technical assistance. So there are ways that I could potentially help. So what I could potentially help with is doing just a very basic evaluation of the strengths of the provider. Maybe helping to clarify what the needs are related to transformation. You know, what are the things that you're trying to accomplish, and what is it going to take for you to get there? And I think an important piece, and Jennifer talked about the importance of data. Last month, our Employment First webinar talked all about data. So if anybody would like to go back and see that, it's archived on our website. But taking a look at what you're measuring, and are you using those outcome measures as a way to assess your progress toward your identified goals? Again, that's very similar to kind of the process that Jennifer talked about. So on the next slide, you'll see contact information for DDA staff at the regional offices, and of course my email address is at the bottom of the screen there. So if you're asking for more technical assistance from DDAs, especially around employment, I would say, you know, the things that I would start looking at would be taking a look at the transition plan that was submitted to DDA, taking a look at your employment data, referencing your quality assurance plan, and potentially if there's another strategic plan, and your current policies and procedures, because all of that together is really going to give a picture of where you are now. So having said that, there's a couple of things that providers that are newer in the transformation process can kind of check off your list first before seeking any technical assistance, because these are things that that have already been provided by way of resources. Many of them are linked in this presentation, and many of them come directly from our Employment First webpage or our webinars. So again, good place to start. I would highly recommend, if you haven't already, downloading and reading the ODEP transformation manual that was released earlier last year. We sent it out in our Employment First newsletter, and it's actually on our website. It's a wonderful resource. It was developed in conjunction with ODEP's subject matter experts from all across the United States. And these are people that are actively involved with provider organizations nationally in transformation. So these are people that have done it, that have lived it, and it's a really wonderful manual. So if you haven't already looked at that and you're having questions about where to start, that would be the first place I would suggest. And then I would highly recommend that within your organization, you form some kind of transformation team, because it's really important that that internal team, they're going to be the driving force and really providing leadership regarding your organization's transformation. So it can't be just one department or one person. It's really got to be an integrated process. And then again, going along with the ODEP transformation manual, I would highly recommend going through some sort of organizational self-assessment. So again, last year, through ODEP, we made available to providers in Maryland the Organizational Transformation Series with Tom Wilds and Jenny Sasnet. Many of you took part in those webinars or their in-person trainings, and they walked providers through that really important process of self-assessment. Their webinars are archived on our website, along with part 1 and part 2 of the self-assessment. So again, really easy places to kind of get started. After you've done that, you've gone through the self-assessment, you're going to be able to create a vision for your organization. Where do you want to go? What is it that you want to see your service model look like? And then you're going to use that vision and self-assessment to update your quality assurance and strategic plans. And all along the way, and Jennifer talked about all of these things, making sure that you're having open communication with the people that you support, with families, with direct support professionals, and any other, community stakeholders. Jennifer talked a lot about how connected their organization is at the community level and how many different committees and community partnerships they're involved in. So making sure that you're communicating what's happening and why things might look different, and making sure people are part of that conversation. So again, I would like to ask, if you're listening to this webinar and you want a copy of anything I just referenced, please, this is a personal request, please don't email me asking me to send them to you, because instead what I'd ask is that you go to the links that I've provided and you go to our website to get them. If you do that and then you still can't find them, you're absolutely free to contact me. It's just that if everybody sends me an individual email asking for copies, it's very difficult for me to get those out. So that's why we've really gone through the effort of making our website as full of resources as possible, and why I've created this PowerPoint with lots of links that will get you to those resources. So let me talk about, if you're not sure what to do first, now that you've done those first steps, these are some questions that you and your transformation team can start asking. These are pretty basic questions, but I think they can really get organizations a long way in the first steps of transformation, and actually probably later stages of transformation as well. So do your organizational values and operations support the idea that anybody of working age can work or be active members of their community? And if the answer to that is yes, in what ways are those things evident in your practices and how you train your staff and how you support families and all of the things that Jennifer talked about that their focus was at change? Take a look at your employment flow of services. So do your strategies emulate the best practices of customized employment? So Jennifer shared that it took time for their organization to kind of get that flow down, and that in fact they're still learning and they're still developing their team and figuring out how many people need to be dedicated to that process. So again, these aren't strategies that are going to happen overnight, but really looking at what it takes to take somebody through that flow, and that at the end of that, the hope is that the person is engaged in competitive employment. And if the person isn't working full-time, what else can the person be supported to do in integrated settings? So kind of looking, again, as Jennifer stated earlier, not just employment first, but what's the rest of someone's life look like? Again, Jen also mentioned engagement with the board. So how engaged is your board of directors around transformation? Has there been clear and open communication with them about expectations and the vision? And are you leveraging a wide variety of funding and resources? Again, there are a lot of community-based, non-disability specific things that we can be supporting people to access in their communities. Other questions to start with: do your policies and procedures support your vision for your organization and how you're going to get there? So if the answer to that is no, that can be a starting point, is really looking at how to align your policies and procedures with your vision. What are your plans around staffing and training and development related to the values? So we know that if you have a pool of direct support professionals that may be used to doing a job that is happening in a facility, that they may need support to understand how their role may change or what it might mean to support someone in a community model or in employment. Another useful tool that many providers use is utilizing small pilots as a way to learn those new flow of services. Because again, a lot of these changes aren't going to be things that can be taken to scale in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take some time. So a pilot can be a great way of trying new things and adjusting accordingly. Another important thing that I have a lot of discussions with providers about when I'm visiting is talking about transitioning youth. Again, this is something I heard Jennifer talk about at Change, is that it's very different, or it can be very different, when you're supporting a transitioning youth and a family that maybe has been socialized very differently, and to expect more employment outcomes and community membership, as opposed to maybe a person that's been in services for quite a while and is very used to a very different business model. So how are you changing that communication for new transitioning youth? So for instance, rethinking how you explain your services to a transitioning youth and their families. So in the past, it might have been that you bring people in and tour your facility. But now that the focus is more on customized employment and community membership, how might that communication change to describe that new reality? How does your organization support self-advocacy? And are all of your direct support professionals able to speak about the values of your organization? So, if your direct support professionals are expected to support people in the community, do they have a clear understanding of what that might look like? And how are they going to get that information from your organization? So this slide, I've provided kind of a timeline of some next steps as far as information and guidance from DDA around transformation issues. So again, this is not a written in stone timeline, so please don't take it as such, but this is really, will give us a good idea of kind of where we're headed with some things. So in February, we are going to be doing a status update webinar for stakeholders in regards to our rate study. So to make sure that everyone knows the status of that. In February, DDA is also going to be providing additional training to regional staff at the DDA regional offices about transformation and the validation tool that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, and how to use that tool. Late winter, early spring, DOORS and DDA are going to be making public our updated memo of understanding. So I've mentioned this a few times over the last 10 months that DOORS and DDA are actively updating that MOU, and we're actually getting close to the end of that process. It's been a really wonderful process. We've worked really closely, and we've had a chance to work with a small stakeholder group of providers to make sure that we're getting the memo just right. And what's going to go along with that memo of understanding will be joint communication about the MOU. It will include some frequently asked questions, and we'll most likely either be doing some regional in-person trainings or even a webinar jointly with DOORS to talk about the MOU. So that should be coming up here soon, and we're really excited about that. This spring, CCSs will be starting to get very intensive training in reference to person-centered thinking and person-centered planning, and the new person-centered planning tool. So we know that CCSs are really at the heart of this person-centered planning process, along with the person receiving the services. So we want to make sure that they're the first ones to get that really intensive training, and we're really excited to get that started. Something that I just heard a little bit more about yesterday is that ODEP is going to be making available an organizational transformation webinar series. It's probably going to happen in the spring. They're going to be sending out some more information. Now they've had transformation webinar series like this before, but this one is really going to focus on providers that are kind of at the next step of transformation. So this is not going to be for beginner transformation. This is kind of what they're calling organizational transformation 2.0. So as soon as I get information about that, I will send it out to all provider organizations, and it will most likely require an application of some sorts and a commitment letter from providers that outlines their commitment in participating in that. Also in the spring, DDA will be holding a webinar for provider organizations, providing more guidance around the new service definitions, including things like training requirements and all of that good stuff. So we're excited to be able to provide that level of guidance. In the summer of this year, DDA, along with our subject matter experts from ODEP, are going to be developing and making available a 3-part webinar training tool that's going to be completely focused on the delivery of community-based services. And what I'm excited for in particular is that 2 of those 3 webinars are going to focus specifically on the experience of the direct support professional. So we really want this to be able to be used as a training tool at the provider level for your direct support staff. And we like the fact that this can be available on our website to be used anytime, because I know it can be a challenge for a direct support professional to be able to travel and take part in an in-person training. So, and then finally, fall or winter of this year, that same person-centered thinking and person-centered planning training and the person-centered planning tool will now shift to providers. So they'll be seeing the same level of training that I talked about the CCSs getting earlier in the year. So that hopefully will help you understand where we are in the process. So it's my hope that this webinar helped providers kind of get a little bit more focus and at least see how, the examples that Jennifer gave were just spectacular. I loved it. It kind of put all the resources made it alive, and this is what it looks like to actively go through it. So let me just check to make sure we don't have any last questions here before we close. Somebody says, how can the role of the CCS best support an organization's transformation? That's actually a great question. I alluded to that just a second ago, that how incredibly important CCSs are to this. So I can share that last week, DDA held 4 all-day regional sessions specifically for CCSs to talk about transformation, and they were all-day events, and we really went through the new waivers, new service definitions, person-centered planning, and all of these things. So we recognize how critically important they are to the process, and we also have an Employment First webinar series that's specifically focused on CCSs, and so they're absolutely included in this process very much. I don't see any more questions, so I just want to kind of throw out a final thought. I know everybody's probably heard this quote before from Peter Drucker: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." But I keep this quote next to my desk because I think the sentiment is so incredibly important when it comes to DDA's system transformation. We could work on systems change, we could write new waivers, new service definitions, and do all of that stuff. But if we don't truly change the culture, then none of it's going to fall into place. So I think each of us, regardless of what our roles are, we really have an individual opportunity to impact the culture of our organization and really the society at large, because this is not just about you know, disability specific services. It really is about a different, a society that looks a little different. So believing and communicating the values of full inclusion for people with disabilities is something that we can all do regardless of where we are in transformation. So just a little ending thought there. Our next Employment First webinar is scheduled for Friday, February 16th at 10 o'clock. So typically about 2 weeks beforehand, we'll send out an announcement and a reminder. And Jennifer, I'd like to just thank you again for your time and for all the passion that you and your organization have in reference to transformation. And on that note, I'd like to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody.